Emily sought solace in the countryside.
Away from the city's clamor, I yearned for tranquility.
The sun, a warm caress, painted the fields gold.
Birdsong filled the air, a soothing melody.
She ambled along the dirt path, each step lighter than the last.
The air, crisp and clean, filled my lungs.
A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, whispering secrets.
Emily smiled, a sense of calm washing over her.
For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace.
The city, with its noise and chaos, seemed a world away. A flash of crimson, stark against the verdant grass, caught her eye.
I stopped, my breath hitching in my throat.
A bloodstain, dark and ominous, marred the path's edge.
Curiosity, laced with unease, drew me closer.
It was a large stain, still wet.
Dread coiled in my stomach, cold and tight.
She scanned the surrounding woods, shadows dancing in the undergrowth.
A shiver ran down my spine.
The idyllic peace of moments ago shattered.
An unsettling feeling, primal and instinctive, warned me of danger.
The rational part of her screamed to turn back.
Yet a morbid fascination took hold.
She had to know more.
Cautiously, I stepped off the path, following the trail of blood.
The air grew heavy, thick with the metallic scent of blood.
The once welcoming woods now felt oppressive, closing in on me.
Each step she took was hesitant, filled with growing fear.
More bloodstains appeared, larger and more frequent.
The woods were silent now, the birdsong replaced by an eerie stillness.
My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat.
The trail led to a clearing, bathed in an unsettling silence. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The trees stood tall and foreboding, their branches casting long, twisted shadows on the ground. It was a place that seemed forgotten by time, untouched by the world outside.
And there, in the center, stood a man. He was motionless, like a statue carved from the very darkness that surrounded him. His presence was both unsettling and magnetic, drawing the eye despite the instinct to look away.
His clothes were torn, his face obscured by a tangle of hair. He looked like he had been through a nightmare, his appearance a testament to some unspeakable ordeal. The hair, matted and wild, hid his features, adding to the sense of dread that hung in the air. His hands, covered in blood, glinted in the dappled sunlight. The crimson stains were stark against the pale skin, each drop telling a story of violence and despair. The sight was both horrifying and mesmerizing, a gruesome spectacle that was impossible to ignore.
Her blood turning to ice. She could feel the chills spreading through her veins, freezing her in place. The terror was palpable, a living thing that wrapped around her heart and squeezed.
The man slowly raised his head, his eyes, wild and unseeing, fixed on her. They were eyes that had seen too much, eyes that held a madness that was both terrifying and pitiable. His gaze pierced through her, making her feel exposed and vulnerable. A low growl rumbled in his chest, sending chills down her spine. It was a sound that spoke of primal rage, a warning of the danger that lurked within him. The growl grew louder, reverberating through the clearing, a harbinger of the violence to come. Terror, raw and consuming, seized her. It was a fear unlike any she had ever known, a fear that reached into the deepest parts of her soul and took hold. She could feel it in every fiber of her being, a relentless force that threatened to overwhelm her. It was as if all the air had been sucked from her lungs. She struggled to breathe, each gasp a desperate attempt to stave off the panic that was closing in. Her chest felt tight, her heart pounding in her ears. She stumbled back, a scream rising in her throat. The sound was raw and primal, a manifestation of the terror that gripped her. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet, the world spinning as she tried to escape the nightmare that had become her reality. She burst onto the path, her breath ragged, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. Every step she took felt like it could be her last, the forest closing in behind her, but her relief was short-lived. The momentary sense of safety vanished as quickly as it had come, replaced by a gnawing anxiety that gripped her insides.
Standing in the middle of the path, blocking her escape, was the man. His presence was like a dark shadow, an insurmountable barrier between her and freedom. He grinned, a chilling, blood-stained smile that sent shivers down her spine. It was a smile that promised pain, a smile that spoke of unspeakable horrors.
Emily's blood ran cold. Fear gripped her heart, squeezing it until she could barely breathe. She felt the weight of her terror pressing down on her, immobilizing her. The woods, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. The trees that had once offered solace now seemed to conspire against her, their branches like bars of a cage. She was trapped, with nowhere left to run. Every direction she turned seemed to lead to more darkness, more danger. The man took a step towards her, his grin widening. Each step he took felt like a countdown to her doom, a slow march towards her inevitable end.
"Now," he rasped, his voice hoarse and guttural. "Where were you going?" His words were like a knife cutting through the silence, leaving a trail of dread in their wake.
His words echoed in the stillness, a promise of unimaginable horror. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the weight of unspoken threats. The sunlight, once warm and comforting, now felt cold and menacing. It cast long, eerie shadows that seemed to dance with malevolent intent. The bird song, once a symphony, now sounded like a mournful dirge. Each note was a reminder of the life she might never return to, a life that seemed so far away now. Emily closed her eyes, a single tear rolling down her cheek. She felt the weight of her despair, the crushing realization that she might never escape this nightmare.